See, and then I said to her, at the very least, what you can say is, if I did say that, because she claims she never said it. If I said to her, the least you can do is say, if I did say that, I'm sorry. I said, what you're saying to me right now is that either I'm deaf because I did not hear what I heard, or even if I, have hearing, I'm making it up because you didn't say these words, or my imagination just went really wild. And everything that you're saying to me is basically nothing is your fault, and you don't take any responsibility for it, and you're not going to apologize for it. At which time she's just like, well, if I said that, which I don't think I did, I'm sorry. Which to me is that's a backwards sorry. That's like a backwards apology when you say, if I said this, then I'm sorry, because that just basically takes the onus off of you saying, yes, I did say it. It's you saying, in the event that that situation ever happened, which for you it did and for me it did not, let's just say if it did happen, I'm sorry. And that's why that apology is a piece of shit. But I gave her the out to, at the very least, say that. Again, it manifests, and in more ways than one. I feel like I know people in my life who have grown up with similar upbringings, and because their parents weren't either nurturing, or their parents were very much either, they were very present or they weren't present at all, it somehow has shifted the way in which they think about people, in which the way they express themselves to people, in which they love people. It can have an effect, and it can have a long-term effect that sometimes people aren't even aware of, right? Coming from like a toxic home can absolutely fuck with the way in which you interact with someone, either of the same gender or of the opposite gender, and all throughout your life. Not to be a therapist or act like a therapist whatsoever, but having sat in therapy, I remember my therapist saying something along the lines of, which is what a lot of therapists say, or a lot of people in the school of psychology say, your first interactions with your parents are, your interaction with your parents are like your first lessons in life, essentially. So like it can happen that for people who have seen, let's say, their parents not being in serious committed relationships, they then formulate the idea that, well, we don't need a serious committed relationship. And so they have commitment phobias, where it's like when they do get close to someone, they want to break away. Or, some people may do some overcompensating, where it's like when you see a parent who has lived an extremely wild and rebellious life, the child then becomes extremely structured and wants to keep things in a bubble, right? They want to maintain some form of control. And while the control aspect, the aspect of keeping their life together may sound good, the controlling aspect may be harmful, because they may want to control things like the way in which they love. They don't open up to people. They control just how much a person can get to know them. They control just how much they allow themselves to be free with a person. They control everything, right? Down to their time, the way in which they use their time, down to, the way they express themselves. It's control. And again, all boils down to sins of the father shall be visited upon by the sons. Now, that's not to say that everything that a parent does is going to affect their child, right? Because, when you go to therapy or you go to psychology or anything like that, they always say it's the mother. And that's why some mothers are adverse to their children going to therapy, because, you go to therapy and then it's like, it's your parents' fault. You come home and the mother's like, everything is my fault. And they do the mom guilt thing. Everything is my fault. But take some responsibility in that, right? Take some responsibility in the fact that the way you've treated your children in the past was setting up a template for either how they may treat people or how they may want people treating them, right? You have people who, I don't know the percentages, but the percentages are high when people have seen domestic violence in the household. They go on to repeat that generationally, because I grew up in a household where my father used to beat up my mom, and that was the way that they show love. So now when I get with someone and he hits me, I can tolerate it the same way that my mother tolerated it, right? Things like that. And there are numbers to show that that is a pattern, right? That things like that happening, it is a generational pattern that is clearly visible. And so I say all of this today to say, in my slightly vodka cocktailed state, that I want us to do two things as adults. One, be aware of how the things that our parents have done have affected us as adults, and try to figure out where we can find the good in that and where we can find the bad in that, and then where we can be the change in that. And then two, if you are an adult who has become a parent, you need to be even more self-aware of how maybe what was done to you when you were a child or when you were younger, maybe something that you're inadvertently passing on to your kids, right? I remember one day I called my sister, and it was mostly because my sister, who has the youngest children in the family, she talks about my niece. My niece is a very vibrant, exuberant, personality-filled, boisterous. I don't even know what else to say about this little booger, but she's she's an incredible little human being, right? Not to say that her brother isn't. He is amazing in his own right, but she's very vocal, right? This girl breaks into song at random times. She likes to dance. She talks a lot. And she's soaking up so much at such a small age. She's just soaking up a lot of information. And with that, she also is demonstrating that she has a lot of personality. And I called my sister one day as I was leaving therapy, and I said to her, please don't snuff out her personality. Like, let her be her. And my sister goes, I know. I said, I know you know this, but I'm saying this like on behalf of her. Don't snuff out her personality. Don't snuff that out. Like, allow her to shine. Allow her to be loud. Allow her to sing. Allow her to talk. Allow her to do whatever it is that she wants to do. Granted that it's within certain parameters. Allow her to be her. Because I feel like that will give her, being my niece, the best opportunity to kind of like build who she is and to continue to build who she will become at a later age. Right? Not to say that my personality or anything like that was snuffed when I was a kid, but at the same time, there were moments through my adolescence and later on into my young adult years and then my adult years where I did feel like I had a parent again who was kind of like overprotective, or just say very protective, but in any event who was like overprotective and in some way, shape, or in some ways wasn't very accepting of a lot of the things that I wanted to do with my life, who, kind of judged some of the things that I wanted to do with my life and kind of made me feel inferior in that respect. Made me feel as though like, I couldn't lead this life that I wanted to. And there were a lot of other different factors that came into play. So I won't say it was entirely her doing, but again, as a parent and looking to this person as a role model and then having them judge and critique what I was doing and how I was living, that would impact some of the choices that I would later on make in my life. And so I called my sister and I was just like, you know what, let her be her. I mean, I know she's still a toddler, but let her be her, because I would love to see her grow into a boisterous, little kid and a preteen or an adolescent with so much life and spark, and to continue to see that spark grow. Like, I want to see where that spark would take her, and so I kind of called my sister and I was just like, yo, let this baby be her best, let her live her best baby life, and a lot of that also came from the fact that, like, I was thinking back to, my mom, like, when she sees kids running around, it's like, don't run, you're going to hurt yourself, sit down, don't do this, don't be too loud, don't cry so loud, don't do this. So it's a lot of don'ts, and in her mind, it's a lot of, I'm trying to keep the child safe by not letting them run around, by not letting them be loud and scream at the top of their lungs, by, kind of keeping them sequestered to one area so that way they won't hurt themselves, they won't injure themselves, they won't, they'll be safe. And in that same time, it's kind of like, you're stifling the kid from being a kid. And so I called my sister, I was just like, don't do that, let this kid be her best kid self. Because I've seen it in the past, so she's like, don't do that. And she was like, yeah, but sometimes she gets a little out of hand. I'm like, of course, when she gets out of hand, correct her. But also, when you're correcting her, let her know why, right? When you're correcting her, let her know what the why. Mommy's correcting you because you did this, and this, as opposed to, because I said so, which is a horrible reason that parents often use. I use it sometimes with my own sister's kids as well. But at the same time, that's when they're challenging. That's when they want to challenge the authority, and they want to challenge when I'm telling them, things like, can you please stop touching my belongings? Why? Because you're going to knock it down. Why? Because it's going to fall on the floor. Why? Then I go, because I said so, right? Because clearly every other reason that I've given them flies over their heads. They don't care. But I told her, do that. Make sure that you do that with her, because, she, with her and her brother, they need to know, like, why they're being corrected, and how it helps them versus just being told, like, this is a command coming from, the commanding officer, bringing it back to veterans, whatever. But yeah, as I look back on my own life, so I want to say some of the sins have visited upon me. Some sins have manifested themselves in my love life, in the way in which I went about dating, or not really dating, but just seeing someone and being with them. And some of that could just come from, I didn't know what it was to date, and I didn't have a parent that can really sit down and tell me, this is what dating is, and this is how dating should be, and how it feels, and etc. And to be fair, my mother, didn't have a parent who did that with her either. Her mother was a bit of a totalitarian as well, where it's just like, whatever I say goes. And so she kind of took that as her template of parenting and used that as whatever I say goes, and doubled over because she was the only parent in the household. So, with me being a person who grew up to be very thought heavy, overthinking and thinking and overthinking and overthinking things, very analytical and critical, I would see where these things just would not work for me. And I already started formulating ways in my head, like, listen, if I had a kid, I'm not going to do this, this, and this. When I become an adult, I'm not going to do this, this, and this, because it was just too much. And, and again, we never really